So, let's tackle a huge question today. If you were the one designing a society from the ground up, how would you make it fair? This is the big idea behind what philosophers call the social contract, and it leads us to this really fascinating clash between two completely different ways of thinking about justice.
Okay, let's just start with a thought experiment. Imagine you have the power to create the fundamental rules for a brand new society. But here's the catch. You have absolutely no idea who you are going to be in that society. You could end up rich, you could end up poor, healthy or sick. You could be part of a powerful majority or a really vulnerable minority. With those kinds of stakes, what kind of world would you actually build?
You know, this whole exercise really gets to the core of the modern idea of a social contract. We're not talking about some dusty old document that people signed hundreds of years ago. It's more of a hypothetical agreement. Think of it like a tool that helps us test our own ideas about what's fair. It just asks a simple question. If we could all agree on rules from a perfectly neutral, fair starting point, what would those rules actually look like?
All right, so one of the most famous answers to this massive question comes from the philosopher John Rawls. He came up with a really specific version of this thought experiment that totally changed the way we think about justice.
So Rawls calls this hypothetical starting line the original position. He breaks it down into 3 simple steps. First, you got to imagine you're in this sort of pre-birth state, just waiting to enter society. Second, you and everybody else have to come to an agreement on the basic rules. And third, and this is the absolute kicker, you make this choice from behind what he famously called a veil of ignorance.
So what exactly does this veil of ignorance hide from you? Well, basically everything that makes you you. You don't know if you're going to be wealthy or poor. You have no idea about your natural talents, whether you'll be gifted or disadvantaged. Your gender, your race, your religion, all gone. You don't even know what you'll care about in life. By stripping away all that personal info, the veil forces you and everyone else to be totally impartial.
Okay, so you're behind this veil. You have no idea who you're going to be. How on earth do you decide what's fair? Well, Rawls argued that any rational person would play it incredibly safe. He said you'd use a specific strategy to make your decision, something he called the maximin rule.
So what is this maximin principle? It's really just a strategy for making a choice when you're facing total uncertainty. The name kind of says it all. You want to maximize the minimum. So you look at all your options, you figure out the absolute worst thing that could happen with each one, and then you pick the option that has the best of all those worst-case scenarios.
And when you apply this to building a society, it becomes really clear. Behind that veil, you'd be terrified of the possibility of ending up as the most disadvantaged person, right? So Rawls argues you would rationally choose to build a society that has the ultimate safety net, a society that is designed from the ground up to make life for the person at the very, very bottom as good as it could possibly be.
Now, this sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, a strong focus on protecting the most vulnerable. What's not to like? Well, enter another brilliant thinker, the economist John Rawls. He took a hard look at Rawls's logic and basically said, hold on a minute. He argued that this maximin principle isn't just cautious, it's deeply fundamentally irrational.
To show just how flawed this is, Rawls gives us this really simple choice. Imagine you're in New York and you get 2 job offers. One is a pretty boring, low-paying job right there in the city. The other is a fantastic, high-paying dream job in Chicago. The only catch? There's a tiny, and I mean minuscule risk of a plane crash on the way there. Well, the maximin rule forces you to only compare the worst outcomes. A boring job versus, well, dying in a crash. Since the boring job is obviously better than that, you have to take it. You have to completely ignore the incredible upside of the Chicago job and the tiny probability of disaster.
And Rawls, he did not pull any punches. He said that this kind of decision-making is so out of touch with how real people think, that if anyone actually lived their life this way, they would, and I quote, soon end up in a mental institution. I mean, you couldn't even cross the street if you were always avoiding the absolute worst, most unlikely outcome.
And the critique goes even deeper than that. It gets into some really unsettling moral territory. Rawls asks us to imagine a hospital with just 1 dose of a life-saving antibiotic. You have 2 patients. Patient A is basically healthy, but will die from pneumonia without the drug. Patient B has terminal cancer, and the drug would only give them a few extra months of life. Because patient B is technically the worst off, Rawls' principle demands that we give them the drug, even though it would save patient A's entire life. It gives absolute, unquestioning priority to the most vulnerable, no matter the cost to everybody else.
Okay, so if the maximin rule is that flawed, what's the alternative? What should we do instead? Rawls argued that a rational person behind the veil wouldn't be this extreme pessimist. They'd be a pragmatist. They would make the smart bet. So, Harsanyi's alternative is called expected utility maximization. Now, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but the core idea is actually pretty simple. Instead of just fixating on the worst-case scenario, you'd consider all the possibilities from best to worst and, crucially, how likely each one is to happen. Then you'd pick the society that creates the highest average level of happiness or well-being for everyone.
So here's the crucial difference. Harsanyi's model tells us to design a society not by obsessing over the person at the very bottom, but by trying to lift the average quality of life for the entire population. It's a fundamental shift from a philosophy of absolute protection for the worst off to one of maximizing the overall good.
And this right here, this sets up the final showdown. It's a fundamental clash between two really powerful, really compelling visions of what a just and fair society actually looks like. This isn't just some small disagreement, it's a conflict over the very soul of fairness.
All right, let's break it down side by side. On one hand, you have Rawlsian justice. It's guided by that maximum principle, and its primary focus is locked onto the worst-off person. It's all about extreme risk aversion. On the other hand, you've got Harsanyian justice. It's guided by average utility. Its focus is on the entire population, and it relies on a rational calculation of risks and rewards.
And look, this is not just some dusty debate for philosophy classrooms. This conflict has huge real-world consequences. How we design our tax systems, our healthcare policies, our social safety nets, all of these big, important decisions are shaped by one of these two competing ideas about what justice really is.
So we end right back where we started, with you in the designer's seat. Does true justice demand that we prioritize the most vulnerable, no matter what, even if it might lower the average for everyone else? Or should our goal be to create the greatest good for the greatest number, even if that means the safety net isn't quite as strong? Behind the veil of ignorance, which world would you choose to live in?